The fire had passed weeks ago, not in smoke, not in flame. Those had vanished with the wind, but in the silence that followed. The land was blackened, still warm beneath the crust of ash, and even now the smell of burnt pine drifted on the breeze like a wound that refused to close. Nothing moved below, but high above, the falcon circled. Her wings didn't tremble. She didn't fight the wind. She used it, curved into it, drifted where it led. She had flown over this valley before, when it was green, when rabbits darted through the scrub, and men worked the lower fields in wide hats and sunburned silence. When smoke came from chimneys, not treetops. Now, there were no men, no rabbits, only charcoal outlines of what had once been, the ghost shapes of trunks, the skeletal ribs of a barn that had stood against weather for 50 years and fell in a single night. The wind moved ash in little swirls, almost playful, like it hadn't been the same wind that had fed the fire. The falcon spiraled once, twice, then she stopped climbing and hovered. She did not cry out. There was no one to hear. Below her, the valley opened wide and empty, a deep wound in the earth, hollowed by heat, scabbed over in soot. From up here, it looked quiet, still, almost peaceful. But the falcon remembered the heat. Even at altitude, the currents had screamed. The trees had gone up like matches. She'd seen animals run and never return. There had been a boy. She remembered him. He'd been small, in that way that looked temporary. His shirt too big, his hands too thin. He had run out of the trees barefoot, carrying something wrapped in a towel, a rabbit or a kitten maybe. He hadn't looked up, just ran toward the far fence line, where the dry riverbed once held a path to the north. She didn't know if he made it, but she circled that place now, watching, the same way she'd watched the fire climb the ridge, relentless, alive, and unmerciful. The wind shifted. Below her, something moved. Not life, not really. Just a piece of tin, flapping where the barn had been, a remnant of roof, rusted red before, now black at the edges. It tapped against a beam with a soft, slow rhythm. Tap. Pause. Tap. It was the only sound. The falcon dipped her wings and glided lower. The ash rose around her like snow. Puffs of it lifted from every movement, even her shadow. She circled once more, scanning. There was no prey here, no food. But falcons aren't always hunting. Sometimes they just watch. Sometimes they just remember. She landed on a blackened post, her talons curling carefully around the still hot wood. The fence had once marked pasture, uneven, dusty, but loved. Children had leaned against this very post with sticky fingers and sunburned arms. Now it leaned back, barely upright, but it held. From here, she could see the whole valley, burnt to the river's edge, smoke still clinging in hollows. The farmhouse had collapsed. The oak behind it stood, but only just, its crown gone, bark split like paper. In the distance, a new sound, a truck, far off. Tires against gravel, slow. The falcon turned her head, listening. Something was coming back. Not the fire, not the wind, someone. Before the fire, the valley had its rhythms. The mornings came slow, peeled open by the sound of insects and the creak of the pump outside the farmhouse. Chickens stirred beneath the coop. Dogs barked half-heartedly toward the rising sun. And from the porch, the old man would sit, one hand cradling a chipped mug, the other shielding his eyes as he watched the ridge for deer. The falcon remembered these mornings. She had watched from the top of a pine, tall and healthy then, its branches sharp with green. Her nest had been higher up the slope, tucked into a rocky outcrop, where even the snakes wouldn't dare. She'd made it with dry grasses stolen from the pasture and bits of blue tarp from the boy's playford. Yes, the boy. He was everywhere in those days. Barefoot in the yard, chasing the border collie, or crouched in the tall weeds, building cities out of twigs and pebbles. His hair was always a mess, his knees always scraped. But he moved with a kind of reverence, like the valley was his, not owned, not possessed, but understood. He greeted trees with handshakes, named the fence posts, left crumbs for the birds in the crook of the broken gate. and he climbed the ridge. Not often. His mother didn't like it. But sometimes, when the sky was clear and the work was done, he'd slip out with a biscuit in his pocket and a slingshot on his belt. He never shot anything. He just liked the feeling of being ready. The falcon had seen him up close only once. He'd reached the upper path, the one just below her perch, and stood there breathing hard, dirt on his face. He looked up, saw her, and smiled. He didn't point, didn't shout. He just watched, like she did. Later, he'd drawn her, on a napkin, scratched with pencil, the way children do when they think no one's looking. The drawing wasn't good, but it was full of truth. He'd left it pinned to the inside wall of the barn, near the feed bags. After the fire, it was gone. Everything was. The grass, the coop, the house, the boy. The falcon had flown far in the days after, to a new ridge, where the air still smelled of stone, not smoke. But something pulled her back. Not hunger, memory. Today, as the light turned low, the valley whispered again. Not loudly. It had no voice left for that. But something shifted in the breeze. A presence, a weight. The falcon circled lower. She passed over the ash field where the garden once grew. Now only a curl of wire fencing and half a rake. The fig tree was gone. The swing, too. But the earth still held the shape of them, as if unwilling to forget. A footstep. She turned sharply in the air. Near the edge of the valley, where the dirt road curled behind the last stone wall, someone moved, slow, careful, hunched beneath a canvas pack. Thin arms, a braid tucked under a wool hat. Not the boy, but someone like him. The falcon veered upward, catching a thermal, then hovered. She watched. Below, the figure moved toward the ruins, not like a stranger, not like a looter, but like someone returning. Each step tested the ground. Each glance was weighted with recognition. They knelt near the trough, brushed ash from a fallen post, then looked up, right at her. The falcon did not cry out. She only held her wings against the wind and drifted. Because in this valley, even now, some things did return. The figure moved deeper into the ruin. Ash puffed gently beneath each step, and the earth below felt unfamiliar, softer than it once had been, broken open by heat, and then left to cool without care. What had been a front path was now a mess of charred boards and stone, but the foundation was still there. The walls were outlines, and the doorframe, split down the middle but standing, waited as if it remembered what it was supposed to do. She stepped through it. The house was open to the sky now. The roof had collapsed, taking the ceiling beams and most of the upper floor with it. Pieces of the staircase lay twisted in a heap. Sunlight fell in broad rectangles onto what had once been a kitchen floor. Blackened metal fixtures jutted from the wall like ribs. The woman knelt near what used to be the sink. She touched the edge of a burned countertop. A familiar place, once where hands washed tomatoes from the garden, where spoons clattered in the morning, where her father stood with his back turned, humming a song no one ever knew the name of. The song was gone, but the smell of it lived in her. Some mix of coffee, lemon soap, and dusty curtains. And it caught her breath now, even though all she breathed was ash. Outside, the falcon shifted position. From her new perch atop the collapsed barn frame, she could see the woman clearly. Not a child, but not yet hardened. A mouth held quiet by loss, but eyes still full of observation. The falcon tilted her head, watching. The woman moved again. She passed through what remained of the living room. There was no couch, no bookshelves. But beneath a melted picture frame, something small lay untouched. A marble, pale blue, slightly scorched, but whole. She picked it up, rubbed it clean, turned it in her fingers. It had belonged to the boy. He kept them in a jar by the window, guarding them like treasure. Sometimes when storms rolled in, he'd pour them out and line them up like soldiers, assigning each a rank, a name, a destiny. She pocketed it gently. Then, as if the weight of the place caught her all at once, she sat down. Not on anything, just the dirt, the debris. her legs folded beneath her, hands resting on her knees. She closed her eyes and listened. There was no wind now, no fire, no speech. But the silence itself was speaking, low, patient, and vast, like an echo that hadn't quite finished dying, the kind of silence that asked you to stay a little longer, not to grieve, just to witness. Above, the falcon opened her wings, lifted into the air, circled once more, and vanished behind the ridge. Because some moments were not meant to be watched. They were meant to be left alone. Night in the valley arrived without ceremony. There were no insects to sing it in, no rustle of animals bedding down. The wind had withdrawn to the upper ridges, and even the trees, what few remained, stood stiff as monuments. The light faded fast once the sun dipped, and within the crumbled bones of the house, darkness settled like a slow tide. The woman lit no fire. She sat in the old doorway, wrapped in a weathered canvas coat, the same she'd worn the day she left. Its elbows were patched with thread pulled from curtains in this very house, a child's attempt at stitching memory into fabric. Now, it smelled of ash, travel, and the faintest trace of cedar. She cradled a small tin lantern, battery-powered, weak, and turned it low, enough to see the ground and nothing more. Behind her, in what used to be the pantry, she had cleared a spot to sleep. She'd found a few dry boards, laid them over stone, and layered her pack on top as a pillow. Nothing soft, nothing comfortable, but solid. It would do. She ate quietly. Dried fruit, a crust of hard bread, the last of a bottle of clean water. Then she opened her notebook. Not to write, just to read. The pages were full of old things. Poems she'd scribbled as a child, sketches of the dog that used to chase birds across the field. One page torn and taped back after an argument with her brother. She paused on a page near the back. A map, rough and vague, drawn from memory. The way the land used to look. Creek, ridge, barn, fig tree, fence line. And the word written at the center, home. She closed it. The night pressed in. The cold came next, slow and creeping. Not cruel, but complete. And then she heard it. A sound. Very soft. Not wind. Not her own breath. She turned off the lantern and held still. The sound came again. The smallest shift. Gravel underweight. Metal tapping wood. Then a pause, then nothing. But in that nothing she knew. She was not alone. She rose silently, one hand brushing the side of the ruined doorframe. No light, no movement. She stepped outside. The sky above was starless, covered in a thick veil of smoke still caught in the upper atmosphere. But she could see enough. The gray of the ash field, the broken remains of the barn, and beyond that, something. A flicker. Not flame. A glint. She moved toward it, slowly, boots muffled in dust. Past the dry trough. Past the post where the clothesline had once swayed in summer. Her hand found a piece of the fence rail, and she stopped. The glint was gone, but she could hear it now. Breathing. Close. Animal. She held her breath. Let her eyes adjust. And then, out from the shadowed side of the barn, a shape emerged. A dog. Thin, coated in soot. One leg limping, but its eyes sharp and locked on her. It didn't growl, it didn't run. It just stared, like it had been waiting. Her voice caught. "Benny?" she whispered. The dog's ears perked. His tail moved just once. She knelt, slowly. He limped forward, step by step, then stopped just shy of her reach. His muzzle twitched. He sniffed the air. Then he sat. And that was enough. She didn't need him to come closer, just to stay. She sat too, cross-legged in the dirt, a hand open between them. The silence of the valley wrapped around them both. For the first time since the fire, she cried. Not loudly, not broken, just steady. Like a stream finding its way through scorched land. The dog didn't move, and above them, unseen in the darkness, the falcon circled once more, high and soundless, then drifted off into the windless black. By dawn, the frost had returned to the ash. It clung in thin veils to the blackened earth, softening the charred edges of broken beams and burnt-out wheels. The valley was coated in a ghostly sheen, and for a brief moment it looked almost untouched, like winter had come before fire, like silence had always ruled here. The woman stirred beneath her coat, eyes opening slowly. She didn't shiver. Not yet. The cold hadn't crept into her bones, but the stillness had. Her breath was visible. The dog, Benny, lay curled beside her on the wood she had cleared, his side rising and falling like a rhythm remembered from years ago. She reached out, let her hand rest gently on his fur. Still warm, still alive. She stood, stiffly, slowly, with the wear of old ache and new miles. She stretched once, then began the day without words, without plan, just motion. She moved through the remains of the house, pausing here and there, searching not for survival. She had done that already, but for something older, something rooted, something named. At the far end of what had once been the hallway, she found the closet door, blackened but still intact. Inside was only a skeleton of coats, their fabric melted or torn. But at the very back, tucked behind warped timber, something had survived. A boot box. She pulled it free. Inside were papers, curled at the edges but not burned. Her mother's recipes, her brother's school drawings, and beneath them, a photograph. The whole family on the porch, sun in their eyes, dog in the boy's lap, the house still full behind them. The image was faded, but the memory it held had never left her. Benny let out a soft sound behind her. She turned. He was staring toward the barn, ears alert, tail stiff. She followed his gaze. There, barely visible through the half-collapsed roofline, something had moved. Not wind, not tin. A person. She stepped out quickly, boots crunching frost on ash, and Benny followed at her side. They reached the barn in silence. She crouched behind the wall, peering in. At first, nothing. Then, a flicker of motion. A head, then shoulders. A boy. Thin, tired, wrapped in a dirty blanket, but unmistakably alive. Her breath caught. "Hey," she said, her voice cracked from cold and disuse. The boy turned. He was older than she remembered, maybe 11 now, and his face was hollow with hunger. But his eyes held a spark, defiant and bright. He didn't speak at first, just stared. "I thought you were gone," she said softly. He nodded. "I stayed." She stepped forward. "How long?" "Since the fire." He stood now, arms crossed over his chest. "I couldn't leave Benny." The dog whimpered once, then trotted forward, tail wagging low. The boy knelt, arms wrapping around the animal, burying his face in Benny's fur. Then he looked up at her again. "I kept the trough covered," he said. "Caught rain." She smiled, not big, not full, but the kind of smile that holds back tears. "Smart," she said. They stood together as the sun began to rise behind the hills. The frost melted slowly, revealing the ash beneath, and the black bones of the valley glowed faintly gold. Above them, the Falcon returned. She spiraled once over the ridge, then landed on the old weather vane, rusted and bent. Her feathers ruffled in the breeze, but her eyes were sharp. She watched the small group below, a woman, a boy, a dog, as they turned and walked back toward the house. Nothing was whole, but not everything was lost.